So today I'm going to talk about Australia's interests and role in the Indian Ocean region, our plans to step up our engagement with the region, and opportunities for enhanced defence cooperation, particularly involving our respective air forces. Now, Australia has big stakes in this part of the world. We have by far the longest coastline and the largest maritime jurisdiction of any Indian state. Much of Australia's wealth comes from Western Australia, and much of our trade, exports and imports crosses the Indian Ocean. In my view, much of our future prosperity also lies in this region. But despite the magnitude of our economic and strategic interests, Australia has long focused on the Pacific Ocean. Strategic threats have by and large come from the north of the Australian continent and much of our economic opportunities as well in the past. But part of our Indo-Pacific strategy, Australia is starting to see the Indian Ocean as being a region which needs to be much more actively engaged in. Over the past 50 years, Australia has developed sophisticated national strategies for engagement with the Asia-Pacific, actively engaging on economic and security issues, and supporting the building of regional norms and institutions. And in coming years, as Australia turns westwards as part of a stepped up and comprehensive arrangement in this part of the world, I believe and hope that Australia can also again play a valuable and useful role in the Indian Ocean. Okay, so we're seeing significantly increased strategic competition among major powers right across the Indo-Pacific, including in the Indian Ocean. Indeed, the possible strategic futures of the Indian Ocean are likely to be even more complex than those in the Pacific. From an Australian standpoint, for more than a century, Australia's engagement in the Indian Ocean really has taken place in the context of the military predominance of our great power allies, first Britain and now the United States. And to be frank, this has benefited Australia in many ways, but this blanket, if you like, has also meant that we've paid less attention to the Indian Ocean than we should have. But after several decades of US military predominance, the Indian Ocean is now becoming a much more contested strategic space. As we know, India is emerging as a great power with aspirations to play a leading role in the region. China's Belt and Road Initiative also has the potential to fundamentally alter the dynamics of the region. China's military presence in the Indian Ocean is growing fast and will continue to grow. Indeed, there's a real risk that the India-China dynamic will descend into even greater strategic competition, particularly involving a jostling for influence among the smaller or developing states in the region. In fact, we should expect these smaller or developing states to become the battlegrounds for influence in the future. In my view, the current US military dominance in the region could become a lot more transient than it currently seems. US interest in the Indian Ocean has always been focused on protecting energy security in the Persian Gulf, and this may change once the United States becomes a net energy exporter. A significant reduction in the US commitment in the Persian Gulf, whether under President Trump or one of his successors, could easily create a power vacuum that others will race to fill. And this could potentially, if it were to happen, this could potentially happen much faster than we expect and would be extremely damaging for the stability of our region. And importantly, it's not just about the major powers. There's also a host of middle powers that are active in the Indian Ocean, including, it's a long list, including Australia, Indonesia, France, Pakistan, Saudi Arabia, the Emirates, Japan, Iran, and even Turkey. And all of these will pursue their own national interests, either in collaboration or cooperation or competition with each other. In short, it's going to be a very complex and multipolar environment, and it's certainly no longer business as usual in the Indian Ocean. Now, as I said, these developments in the strategic environment will place smaller or developing states in a very difficult position. Several Indian Ocean states are already suffering the adverse effects of strategic competition among major powers. Now, there's no easy answers to this, but it certainly does give significant reasons for countries such as Sri Lanka and Australia to form close relationships and to work together wherever we can. In fact, there are many opportunities for enhanced defence and security cooperation between Australia and Sri Lanka. And our interests most clearly intersect in the maritime domain. We face a range of maritime security threats ranging from illegal fishing, drug smuggling, people smuggling, and other maritime crime, maritime-based terrorism, as well as the need to protect sea lanes of communication. Now, I personally have been a strong advocate that the Australian Navy should increase the regularity and depth of its presence in the Bay of Bengal as part of an expanded commitment to working with regional navies, including the Sri Lankan Navy. And we've already seen this begin with the Indo-Pacific Endeavour fleet visit earlier this year, and you should expect to see that happening a fair bit more in the future. The Australian Border Force, which is effectively the Australian Coast Guard agency, should also substantially increase its engagement activities with Sri Lanka and other countries in the Eastern Indian Ocean, and potentially coordinate Australia's security efforts in this region. Now, most importantly, Australia needs to promote regional cooperation in maritime domain awareness in the Eastern Indian Ocean through the development, firstly, of integrated national maritime domain awareness systems that can then be developed into bigger regional systems. Now, as a small air force, the Sri Lankan Air Force will have no choice but to work closely with the Sri Lankan Navy and other relevant government agencies in order to achieve this. So what can Australia do to help Sri Lanka develop your maritime surveillance capabilities and more broadly your maritime domain awareness systems? Now, in my view, the biggest contribution that Australia can make is not necessarily in providing equipment. There are other countries, and I would include, for example, the United States or Japan and others, that are much better placed in working with Sri Lanka in addressing the equipment needs of the Sri Lankan Air Force. I believe that the best contribution that Australia can make, and it's actually an extremely important one, is sharing our experience and know-how in finding ways to enhance Sri Lanka's maritime domain awareness in a cost-effective and efficient way. Now, over the last 2 decades, Australia has really made great strides in building its maritime domain awareness system, and this has involved taking a whole-of-government approach towards the problem, really with cooperation between Air Force and Navy at its heart. Our Defence Force is a joint force, and we simply have no choice about this as a medium power country. So together, our armed forces and other government agencies with responsibility in the maritime domain, and I include there our fisheries authorities, search and rescue agencies and law enforcement agencies, have developed what I believe to be a world-class maritime domain awareness system that covers a considerable portion of the Indian Ocean, in addition to a considerable portion of the Pacific Ocean, in addition to the Southern Ocean. And that covers quite a significant portion of the Earth's surface. Now, Australia can share this experience and know-how through training, through swaps of experts occurring in both Australia and Sri Lanka, and many other ways. And now there's also a lot of other innovative ways that Australia and Sri Lanka can work together. The visit of an Australian P-8 maritime surveillance aircraft to Hambantota Airport earlier this year was really a great example of how the two countries can work together. It's pretty clear that Australia needs to even further improve its maritime domain awareness in this part of the world, and it's also clear that Hambantota Airport, which I visited yesterday, is really a world-class facility. Further regular visits by Australian P-8s to Hambantota in the future, together with mutual logistical support arrangements, would provide an excellent opportunity for Australia to pass on its knowledge in this area to our Sri Lankan colleagues and partners. And at the same time, data obtained by Australian aircraft during visits to Sri Lanka could be shared with Sri Lanka and feed into your national maritime domain awareness system. I'm sure there are many other potential for innovative ways of working together, but these sorts of cooperative activities, in my view, would be a win-win for both sides, and could importantly achieve cost-effective and efficient collaboration. So in conclusion, the changing strategic environment in the Indian Ocean is going to force small air forces such as the Sri Lankan Air Force to work much more closely than ever before with the Sri Lankan Navy and various Sri Lankan government agencies that have responsibilities in the maritime domain, that have information in the maritime domain, to build a national maritime domain awareness system and address a very wide range of maritime threats. Secondly, a small air force like the Sri Lankan Air Force must work closely with selected foreign partners. It has no choice. Some of these partners could use their strength in equipment and technology to help build the Sri Lankan Air Force's capabilities. Partners such as Australia will have other strengths. One key strength will be to share our considerable experience in building a strong and effective national MDA system that brings together the various Sri Lankan stakeholders, including the Sri Lankan Air Force. And as I mentioned, there are many other innovative ways, as was demonstrated earlier this year, that Australian-based MDA systems can be used to directly benefit Sri Lanka. Now, let me be clear, it is absolutely in Australia's interests that Sri Lanka develop its maritime domain awareness in this part of the world, and we need to do what we can to help Sri Lanka in that regard. Thank you.